The sun dipped low over Miami Beach, casting long shadows across the gleaming sands and the sparkling turquoise waves. The city, usually alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses in the high-end resorts, now seemed tinged with an unusual hush. Holmes and I had arrived in the early afternoon, our cab cutting through the vibrant chaos of Ocean Drive. Yet there was an undeniable tension in the air that both of us could sense immediately. Holmes, with his usual sharp eye and relentless attention to detail, scanned the streets as if every storefront, every neon sign might conceal a clue, while I struggled to keep up, trying to absorb the dizzying sights and sounds of the city. It was a telegram from Victoria Lang that had brought us here. The message had been brief but urgent. "Sherlock Holmes, your expertise is needed. A matter of utmost discretion involving a stolen family artifact. Please come at once. Time is critical." She had signed only her initials, yet Holmes had recognized the gravity behind the words. Victoria was young, striking, and enigmatic, but she had already shown a level of sophistication and resourcefulness that promised this case would be far from simple. Our first stop was the Lang family penthouse, perched high above the glittering Miami coastline. The building was modern, sleek, and ostentatious, a clear display of wealth and power. Yet even from the cab, Holmes's gaze lingered on details most would overlook. The slightly smudged footprints on the polished marble driveway, the pattern of shadows cast by the setting sun across the balconies. As we entered the penthouse, the usual opulence met our eyes. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the ocean, tastefully arranged furniture, and art pieces of staggering value. But the scene was quickly marred by chaos. The once pristine living room had been ransacked, drawers left open, papers scattered across the floor. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he stepped carefully over the debris, scanning the room. "No signs of forced entry," he observed in his calm, deliberate tone. "Note the window locks, they remain intact. Whoever did this had access or was intimately familiar with the layout. The thief is neither careless nor random." He bent slightly, examining a faint smear on the hardwood floor, and here subtle traces of shoe polish, perhaps to obscure the direction of movement. I felt a shiver run down my spine, though I tried to maintain my usual composure. But how could they enter without breaking anything? "And what about Victoria? Was she here when this happened?" Holmes gave me a measured look, one that implied patience but also challenged me to think beyond the obvious. "We shall know in due course. First, observe the subtleties, Watson. A true understanding of this crime requires reading between the chaos and the noise." Our initial sweep revealed a few critical details. On a small side table, a crystal vase had been overturned, yet curiously, no water had spilled from the remaining flowers. A single medallion, small and ornate, lay on the carpet, engraved with intricate patterns that seemed almost out of place among the disorder. Holmes picked it up with a gloved hand, turning it under the fading sunlight. "Notice the craftsmanship, Watson. A personal item, not merely decorative. Whoever left this intends for it to be found, or perhaps to mislead." It was then that a subtle sound made both of us pause, a quiet shuffle from the balcony. Holmes's eyes immediately darted to the source, and we caught a fleeting glimpse of a shadow retreating into the darker corners of the adjacent building. My heart raced. Miami's skyline, dazzling by day, could easily conceal a predator by night, and it was clear someone had been observing the penthouse, waiting, planning. Holmes, however, remained calm, his mind already cataloging possibilities and implications. Victoria Lang herself arrived shortly thereafter, escorted by a local officer, Detective Ramirez. She was a vision of composure, her expression calm yet tinged with worry, eyes scanning the damage as if measuring each imperfection. She spoke with a clarity and decisiveness that immediately earned Holmes's attention. "I am grateful you came so swiftly, Mr. Holmes. This artifact is not merely of monetary value. It has been in my family for generations, and it contains secrets that must not fall into the wrong hands." Holmes inclined his head, acknowledging her without immediate words. "Miss Lang, might we examine the point at which the thief gained access? Every detail, no matter how trivial it seems, may serve as a key." Victoria led us to a side corridor, where a discreet door, almost invisible in its wood finish, opened into a private study. It was here that the first of the more elusive clues presented itself. A faint but distinct pattern of dust displacement on the bookshelves suggested recent handling, yet no books appeared missing. Holmes crouched, running a gloved finger along the surface. "Interesting," The thief is meticulous yet impatient. They seek not to remove but to discover. As night began to fall, the temperature cooled, and the bustling sounds of the city below dimmed, leaving the room cloaked in a tense quiet. Holmes moved toward the windows, inspecting the horizon where the city lights met the darkened ocean. Observe, Watson. Even in a city alive with distraction, the smallest anomaly catches my attention. A faint reflection here, a window slightly ajar 2 floors down. Details most would dismiss. I could not help but feel a growing sense of unease. Something about Miami at this hour, the combination of glimmering lights and lurking shadows, seemed to amplify the stakes of our mission. Holmes, sensing my tension, did not comment directly but moved with precision, checking angles and distances, his mind evidently running several steps ahead. Detective Ramirez provided what little background information he could. The Lang family, while prominent, had recently been involved in a contentious legal dispute with local business interests. Marcus Kane, a wealthy entrepreneur with considerable influence, had been publicly hostile toward Victoria's family, though the nature of their private dealings remained murky. Holmes absorbed these facts quietly, filing them away as potential motives and misdirections. As we prepared to leave the penthouse to inspect the surrounding areas, Holmes paused at the doorway. Watson, the key to understanding any crime is not merely to witness it but to observe its echoes. Let us begin with the beach. Every footprint, every pattern in the sand, every discarded object may whisper secrets that elude the casual eye. On the way down, the evening air carried a subtle hint of salt, mingled with the faint aroma of exhaust fumes and the faint strains of distant music. The beach, usually alive with tourists and night owls, now seemed eerily silent. Holmes crouched near the edge of the sand, examining tiny indentations that, at first glance, appeared random. A struggle, perhaps, he muttered. Note the spacing and depth of these impressions. Someone ran, then halted abruptly. The pattern indicates hesitation, possibly fear. I bent down beside him, tracing the footprint lightly with my finger. Do you believe the thief came from the hotel? Holmes shook his head subtly, eyes fixed on the sand. No, Watson. The tracks approach from the northern dunes, then circle back toward the city. Whoever this is clever, never approaching in a straight line, never leaving a direct path. And these traces, he held up a small medallion he had pocketed from the penthouse, match no common local markings. They speak of intention, of legacy. Whoever owns this has a reason to leave it behind, perhaps as a warning or a puzzle. Night deepened, and the city lights reflected off the gentle waves, creating illusions of movement in the water. Holmes and I continued our survey along the shoreline, both aware that each moment heightened the stakes. Behind us, the faint glow of high-rise windows suggested that observers might still be watching, waiting to see how we would proceed. Finally, as the first hints of stars shimmered overhead, Holmes paused. Watson, this is no ordinary theft. It is calculated, deliberate, and personal. The artifact is a linchpin, and someone intends to ensure it reaches the right or wrong hands. We must tread carefully. Miami, beneath its glittering veneer, holds secrets that will challenge even the sharpest mind. I could only nod, feeling both the thrill and the weight of our task. As we made our way back toward the streets, the city seemed to shift around us, bright, bustling, yet filled with shadows that promised mystery, danger, and revelations yet to come. In that instant, I knew we were not merely chasing a stolen artifact. We were stepping into an enigma that would test every ounce of intellect, intuition, and courage we possessed. And with Holmes leading the way, I trusted that no secret, however well concealed, would remain hidden for long. The night had grown deeper, and Miami Beach, which had seemed so dazzling during the day, now lay under a cloak of quiet tension. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore provided a deceptive calm, masking the undercurrent of danger that Holmes seemed to sense with every step. As we retraced our steps along the northern dunes, he paused frequently, crouching to examine the sand, running his gloved fingers lightly over impressions that at first appeared insignificant. The beach was littered with detritus, discarded, bottles, driftwood, bits of seaweed, but Holmes's gaze never wavered from the subtle anomalies that might reveal the path of the intruder. Notice, Watson, he said quietly, his voice barely rising above the whisper of the wind. The way the sand has been compacted in certain areas. It is uneven, deliberate. Our thief moved with caution, yet at times hesitated, retraced steps. This indicates indecision or perhaps an awareness of being observed. We are dealing with someone highly intelligent. I followed him, straining to see what he saw. My eyes traced faint footprints that led toward a narrow stretch of rocks at the edge of the dunes. The mark suggested a struggle, a brief but violent encounter, and then a sudden flight back toward the city. Holmes picked up a tiny fragment of fabric caught on a thorn, examining it under the faint glow of the moon. "Silk, Watson," he murmured. "Not common clothing, but a fine garment, likely from a jacket or lining. Our suspect is not a petty thief, but someone accustomed to luxury, or someone trying to impersonate it." We pressed onward, our footsteps muffled by the soft sand. Holmes's mind, always several steps ahead, catalogued every possibility. The local gangs that operated discreetly at night, the business rivals who might resort to theft for leverage, the individuals within Victoria's circle who might have secrets worth concealing. Each clue, no matter how minor, seemed to form part of a larger mosaic he was piecing together, a tapestry of motives and misdirection. As we rounded the dunes, a faint glimmer caught Holmes's attention. A small medallion, partially buried, in sand catching the moonlight with an almost deliberate glint. He bent and picked it up, turning it over in his hand. The engraving was intricate, unfamiliar, yet clearly symbolic. "A marker," he said, eyes narrowed. "Our thief leaves traces not merely to mislead, but perhaps to challenge. This medallion is intended to be found by someone with the intellect to recognize its significance. It is a message, Watson, and we must decipher it." The wind carried a subtle hint of something acrid, a faint smoke rising from somewhere along the beach. Holmes's expression sharpened. "Do you smell that?" A distant fire, likely a signal or an attempt to destroy evidence. Someone is actively monitoring their own trail, Watson. They know we are coming. We moved toward the source, careful to avoid disturbing any potential clues. A small fire smoldered near a cluster of rocks, and beside it lay fragments of paper, charred but not completely destroyed. Holmes knelt, gently extracting what remained. "Clever, but not clever enough," he muttered. He held the pieces together, revealing part of a map marked with a series of coded symbols. "The pattern is consistent with a cipher I encountered years ago in London. The thief intends for only a mind trained in deduction to understand it. This, Watson, confirms that we are dealing with a mastermind, not a common criminal." I felt a chill at his words. The implication was clear. Someone not only planned the theft but anticipated investigation, leaving deliberate breadcrumbs for the observant eye. Holmes's face, lit by the flickering remnants of the fire, betrayed a rare hint of excitement. The game, Watson, has begun in earnest. And like all games of intellect, the first moves reveal much about the player. We retraced our steps toward the city, the medallion and cipher carefully secured. The streets of Miami Beach at night were quieter than usual. The usual nightlife replaced by an almost eerie stillness, punctuated by the occasional hum of distant traffic or the murmur of voices from late-night establishments. Holmes's eyes roamed constantly, observing the behavior of passers-by, noting subtle gestures, patterns of movement, and even the slight unevenness of a sidewalk that suggested recent activity. Every detail, no matter how trivial, was a potential clue. Our path led to a small, discreet alleyway near one of the city's older districts. Holmes paused, motioning for me to stop. "Observe, Watson. The alignment of graffiti on this wall, the remnants of a torn poster, even the scuff marks on the bricks all tell a story. Someone passed this way not long ago, and the direction of the markings suggests movement toward the docks. We must follow, but cautiously. The night conceals many eyes." The alley opened onto a broader street, and ahead, the glow of lights along the docks shimmered against the water. Holmes's pace quickened slightly, yet his movements were deliberate, almost fluid, as though he anticipated unseen threats. Along the way, we encountered a figure leaning in the shadows, observing our approach. Holmes's gaze met the stranger's with a piercing intensity. The figure tensed, then turned abruptly, disappearing into the night. That was no ordinary passerby, Holmes remarked, his voice low. They were assessing us, testing our reaction. Whoever this is, they know the artifact's value, and they know we are investigating. Our presence here is no accident. The dock stretched before us, a maze of warehouses, shipping containers, and quiet loading bays. Holmes moved with a practiced stealth, scanning each doorway, each shadowed corner. Notice the subtle disturbances in the gravel, Watson. Someone has passed this way, possibly multiple times. Timing is key. They may return, or they may already be watching from an elevated position. As we advanced, a faint movement caught my eye, a shadow flitting between containers, barely discernible in the dim light. Holmes noticed instantly, and without hesitation, he directed me to take cover behind a nearby stack of crates. Patience, he whispered. Observation before action. Recklessness would be our undoing. Minutes stretched, and the tension became almost unbearable. The faint sounds of the water, the distant horn of a ship, and the occasional creak of the dock underfoot created an atmosphere ripe with suspense. Finally, a figure emerged, moving with purpose, carrying a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth. Holmes's eyes narrowed, noting every detail: the gait, the angle of the shoulders, the careful handling of the object. He whispered, "There. Observe the hands. Gloves, but worn. Deliberate concealment, yet clumsy in certain movements. Our suspect is familiar with caution, yet human, and therefore fallible." We followed at a distance, careful to remain unseen. The figure approached a small, abandoned warehouse near the far end of the docks. Holmes gestured for silence, then cautiously led us around the perimeter. Through a cracked window, we observed the figure placing the bundle on the floor, then retrieving what appeared to be a set of tools from a small bag. The methodical movement suggested someone accustomed to handling valuable items with care, but the haste betrayed a hint of nervousness. Holmes's mind, always calculating, catalogued the possibilities. "The tools indicate either extraction or manipulation," he murmured. "The bundle likely contains the artifact, or a decoy intended to mislead. Either way, the next move will reveal their intentions." As we watched, the figure paused, glanced toward the city, and then quickly returned inside. The brief exposure confirmed Holmes's suspicion. The criminal was aware of surveillance, aware of potential pursuit, and strategically calculating each step. He turned to me, his voice barely audible. "Watson, we are now in the realm of the informed observer. Every detail counts, every movement a potential message. Our next decision will determine whether we gain the upper hand or fall into the trap deliberately laid for us." We retreated slightly to reassess, taking note of the figure's pattern, the structure of the warehouse, and the faint signs of prior activity: footprints, disturbed gravel, even a small, barely noticeable streak of mud leading toward a side door. Holmes's mind worked swiftly, linking this evidence with the medallion and the cipher we had recovered earlier. "The path is deliberate, Watson. The artifact is not merely stolen. It is bait, a lure for those who would pursue it. We must anticipate the intentions behind the trap." Minutes later, the figure re-emerged, this time carrying a larger object, shrouded and carefully balanced. Holmes gestured, and we followed at a cautious distance, navigating the labyrinth of containers and shadows. Every step seemed choreographed, yet Holmes's sharp eye detected subtle irregularities: footprints overlapping, a discarded piece of fabric that had not been noticed before, a faint glint on a distant railing. Finally, the figure approached a small boat moored at the edge of the dock. Holmes's voice was barely a whisper, yet sharp with certainty. "The escape is planned, the vessel ready. The question is, where to next? The artifact, Watson, may already be in transit, and we must be prepared for the unfolding chain of events." As the boat moved silently into the darkened waters, Holmes made his calculations, noting angles, speed, and potential escape routes. The night air carried the scent of salt and uncertainty, and I felt the palpable tension of the chase ahead. "One thing is certain, Watson," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Miami may shine brightly by day, but by night it conceals a labyrinth of shadows, and within those shadows our adversary moves with purpose. The game is far from over." The following evening, Miami Beach seemed to pulsate with an energy all its own. Neon lights flickered along Ocean Drive, the laughter and music from the nightclubs mingling with the scent of salt from the nearby ocean, creating a surreal atmosphere that felt both glamorous and dangerous. Holmes and I navigated the bustling streets with calculated care, weaving past throngs of tourists and the occasional late-night reveler, our senses attuned to the subtle nuances that others would have overlooked entirely. Holmes's gaze swept over every detail, the movement of waiters, the slight tension in the posture of security guards, the glimmer of a hidden camera perched atop a building corner. Each element was noted, catalogued, and weighed against the unfolding enigma we were pursuing. Holmes's attention, however, was focused on one specific establishment, a nightclub tucked between two larger hotels. The entrance was understated, marked only by a neon sign that glowed in pulsing red, and a line of expensive cars waiting outside. From the shadows we observed the patrons arriving, men and women in elegant attire, their faces partially obscured by the dim lights and the occasional flourish of a hat or veil. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he studied the crowd, his mind working through possibilities. "Notice, Watson," he murmured, "the pattern of arrivals. It is deliberate, almost ritualistic. Certain individuals are allowed immediate entry, others delayed. The club itself serves not merely as entertainment, but as a hub of observation and exchange." We slipped inside, the faint thrum of bass vibrating through the polished floors and into our feet. The air was thick with the mingling scents of perfume, cigar smoke, and the tang of spilled drinks. Holmes's gaze immediately picked up on Marcus Kane, the businessman we had learned was connected to Victoria Lang, leaning casually against the bar while engaging in conversation with a sharply dressed man whose features suggested a mixture of caution and familiarity with clandestine dealings. Holmes tilted his head slightly, noting the angle of Kane's shoulders, the subtle flick of his eyes toward the entrance, and the precise way his hands maneuvered a glass of amber liquid. Every movement spoke volumes to Holmes's trained eye. As we moved closer, attempting to blend with the crowd, Holmes whispered, "Kane is aware we are here, though he cannot yet confirm our identities. Observe the subtleties of his interactions, every gesture calculated, every glance purposeful. He is testing the waters, gauging reactions." I followed his lead, careful to maintain an unobtrusive presence, yet acutely aware of the heightened tension that seemed to vibrate in the very air around us. We made our way to a quieter section, near the back of the club, where a narrow balcony overlooked the main dance floor. Here Holmes's attention was caught by a young woman in a striking emerald dress, her movements fluid yet cautious, her gaze scanning the crowd as if anticipating someone's arrival. She carried herself with an air of familiarity and caution, yet there was an unmistakable sense of purpose in her actions. Holmes's eyes glinted with recognition, though he remained silent. I sensed that she might be a vital piece in the puzzle, someone who held knowledge that could direct our investigation, or mislead it entirely. Suddenly, a man emerged from the shadows near the DJ booth, delivering a small note into the woman's hand before retreating as quietly as he had appeared. The woman glanced around, then slipped into a private lounge, clutching the paper closely. Holmes's voice was a low whisper, tinged with anticipation. "Our contact, Watson, though whether she intends to aid us or divert us, remains uncertain. Observe her reactions closely. She may reveal more than words can convey." We followed cautiously, navigating the labyrinth of tables and shifting lights. The lounge was dimly lit, the walls lined with plush seating and velvet drapes that muted sound and created an intimate, almost conspiratorial environment. The woman was seated at a small table near the back, the note spread out before her as she scanned its contents with a mixture of urgency and calculation. Holmes signaled for me to remain quiet, and we approached slowly, allowing the crowd and shadows to shield our movements. Holmes inclined his head slightly toward the woman, and after a brief moment she seemed to acknowledge our presence, though subtly, with only the faintest tilt of her head. It was enough for Holmes to recognize her as an ally of sorts, someone who could provide insight into the movements of Marcus Kane and the network surrounding the stolen artifact. "Trust is a currency, Watson, and in this city, it is as valuable as the artifacts they covet," he murmured. "Our next step will require both discretion and skill." The woman, now aware of our approach, motioned for us to sit. Her voice when she spoke was calm, yet urgent. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, you must understand the artifact is more than an heirloom. It is a key to something far larger, something that many are willing to kill for. Kane is involved, yes, but he is not the mastermind. He is merely a pawn, a very wealthy and dangerous pawn, but a pawn nonetheless." Holmes listened intently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "And the mastermind?" he prompted, his tone measured yet insistent. She hesitated, glancing around the room as if the walls themselves might betray her. "Someone who operates from the shadows, someone who knows every movement, every step. They've anticipated many actions already, leaving markers and signals for those who pursue them. If you are to recover the artifact, you must follow the trail they have left carefully, without triggering the traps they've set." I felt a chill at her words. "Traps?" I asked. "Physical traps or psychological?" She smiled faintly, a hint of grim humor in her expression. "Both, Dr. Watson, both. They understand the mind as much as the body, and they know that fear and hesitation can be as binding as chains. Watch every gesture, every pause, every interaction. And trust no one fully. Not Kane. Not anyone you see in this room." Holmes inclined his head thoughtfully, then turned his piercing gaze toward the note she had received. He took it gently, scanning the contents with a practiced eye. The writing was cryptic, a series of coded instructions that seemed to outline a sequence of locations and tasks, each one connected subtly to a larger scheme. "Ah," he murmured, his lips curling slightly. "A breadcrumb trail, laid with precision. The mind behind this is both meticulous and audacious. Whoever crafted these instructions is confident in their intellect, yet overconfident perhaps, as all humans eventually are." The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "There is one more thing you must know. Kane is planning a meeting tomorrow evening at the pier near the old warehouses. He expects certain exchanges to occur. It is your opportunity, should you wish to intercept, but it will be dangerous. Very dangerous. Be prepared for deception, subterfuge, and perhaps betrayal from those you think are allies." Holmes's eyes gleamed with a familiar intensity, the spark of challenge igniting within him. "Danger is but a companion in our line of work, Miss Delaney." "My name is Delaney," she replied softly, her eyes reflecting both caution and resolve. Holmes inclined his head. "Miss Delaney, your information is invaluable. We shall proceed with the utmost care. Watson, it seems our course is clear. We must anticipate Kane's movements at the pier, decipher the trail, and ensure that the artifact does not fall into unworthy hands. Every detail must be considered, every step deliberate. The game is unfolding before us, and it will require the sharpest observation and quickest mind to navigate safely." Delaney pressed a small device into Holmes's hand, a miniature camera capable of capturing images even in low light. "This will allow you to track the exchanges without drawing attention. Kane trusts the environment, not the observers. Use this wisely." Holmes accepted it, examining the device with interest. "Ah, a clever tool. And yet, Watson, remember, technology can illuminate, but it can also mislead. Our minds must remain our greatest instrument." We left the club with a sense of heightened urgency, the pulsing music fading behind us as we moved through the streets. The neon lights now seemed less inviting, their vibrancy a mere veneer masking the dangerous game unfolding beneath. Holmes was silent for much of the journey back, his mind evidently working through permutations, analyzing the movements, the coded note, the potential threats, and the subtle interactions we had witnessed. As we reached the relative quiet of our temporary lodgings, Holmes finally spoke. "Watson, we have entered the inner circle, observed the pawns, and identified one conduit of information. The next phase will be critical. We must anticipate Kane's actions at the pier, consider all possible deceptions, and prepare for the unexpected. Remember this, the most brilliant minds often leave the smallest traces, and it is those traces that will guide us to the truth." I nodded, feeling the weight of our task pressing upon me. Miami's nightlife, once dazzling and carefree, now appeared as a labyrinth of shadows and hidden motives. Holmes, ever the vigilant observer, had already mapped the intricate web that surrounded the artifact. It was clear that the night ahead, and the day after, would demand every ounce of intellect, courage, and insight we could muster. And yet, in the midst of this tension, I could not help but feel a thrill, an anticipation of the revelations to come. For in Holmes's presence, danger was never merely perilous, it was an invitation to witness the mind at work, to follow the subtle currents of deduction as they unfolded with precision and elegance. The following morning, Miami's brilliance seemed almost hostile in its clarity, the sun glinting harshly off the ocean and the mirrored facades of the high-rise hotels. The streets buzzed with early traffic, the distant sounds of construction and deliveries mingling with the occasional screech of tires on asphalt. Holmes and I arrived at Victoria Lang's hotel, the sleek modern building standing like a fortress of glass and steel. While the city seemed alive with unrestrained energy, Holmes moved with his usual calculated precision, his eyes scanning every detail of the lobby, the angles of security cameras, the placement of concierge staff, even the faint smudge marks on the marble floor. Every subtle hint was a potential clue. We were escorted to Victoria's suite by the hotel manager, a nervous man whose polite demeanor barely masked the tension in his posture. Holmes noted this instantly, observing the slight tremor in the manager's hands and the way he avoided eye contact with certain parts of the room. "Observe, Watson," Holmes whispered. "Even those untrained in deduction can betray their anxiety through minor gestures. Anxiety often masks knowledge or complicity." The suite was lavish, the sort of place designed to impress and reassure, yet now it bore the scars of the previous night's chaos. Drawers had been rifled through, personal items displaced, and yet the intruder had left behind subtle signs that suggested more than mere theft. Holmes immediately moved to a sideboard, inspecting its surfaces with care. He noted tiny scratches along the edge, irregular dust patterns, and the faint smell of a rare cologne. "The thief is meticulous, Watson, but their care is not infallible. Every environment leaves its memory, and here, it speaks volumes." Holmes approached the window overlooking the ocean, his gaze sweeping the horizon as though expecting to see the traces of a shadowy figure still observing from afar. "The entry was not forced," he said, turning back to me. "They possessed either a key, knowledge of the suite's vulnerabilities, or most likely inside assistance. This was no random act. It is calculated, precise, and highly personal." We began a methodical search of the room, examining each item and surface with the meticulous care that Holmes's reputation promised. In a corner, a small desk with an inlaid leather top caught his attention. Holmes lifted it with practiced ease, revealing a shallow compartment containing a stack of papers, some of which had been partially burnt. He retrieved a photograph, slightly scorched at the edges, depicting a young Victoria with a man whose face was deliberately obscured. Beneath it was a series of documents, legal papers, correspondence, and what appeared to be ledger entries indicating significant transactions dating back decades. Holmes's fingers traced the lines of handwriting, his eyes narrowing. These documents suggest more than family wealth. They hint at secrets, partnerships, and perhaps betrayals long buried. The theft of the artifact is entwined with these secrets. This is the reason for the urgency, the reason the thief operates with such precision. I approached the desk, studying the fragments of burnt paper. "Do you believe the artifact is merely valuable, or is it something more?" Holmes did not answer immediately, instead carefully examining the edges of the documents, noting the patterns of burn and the irregular fading of ink. "It is both valuable and dangerous, Watson. The two are often inseparable. One draws attention, the other conceals intent. The thief aims to harness both factors, material worth and hidden knowledge. We must remain vigilant, for the full scope of this operation has yet to reveal itself." Our attention was drawn next to a small, ornate chest tucked beneath the bed. Holmes lifted it, noting its subtle weight and the faint scratches along the hinges. The chest had not been fully disturbed, though the lock bore marks of tampering. Inside, we found a series of personal journals belonging to Victoria, their pages filled with detailed observations of associates, acquaintances, and family interactions. Holmes skimmed through them rapidly, noting a recurring pattern, a series of meetings and cryptic references to the circle, the mark, and the water. Holmes paused, his eyes reflecting a rare intensity. The circle may refer to a group or society, Watson. The mark could be a person or an object. And the water, well, it may be literal or symbolic or both. These journals are not mere reflections. They are clues deliberately recorded, intended to guide or mislead. As he spoke, my eyes caught a subtle irregularity along the suite's far wall. A faint outline suggested a hidden panel, nearly imperceptible to the casual observer. Holmes immediately moved toward it, running his hand along the surface until he found the slight indentation of a latch. With a soft click, the panel opened, revealing a narrow, recessed compartment. Inside lay a small velvet pouch containing another medallion, similar in design to the one we had found on the beach. But this one bore a more intricate engraving, along with a miniature key. Holmes examined it carefully, turning it over between his gloved fingers. A key, Watson. The previous medallion was a signal. This one is an access point. Whoever orchestrated this theft intends to lead us along a path of discovery. Yet the true end remains hidden. Holmes's attention then shifted to the faint pattern of footprints on the suite's polished floors. Despite the previous night's activity, the impressions remained subtle yet telling. Observe the stride and pressure, Watson. Short, deliberate steps with occasional pauses. Fear, caution, and urgency all are present here. The intruder was careful, yes, but even the meticulous falter under tension. We must follow these echoes to understand their sequence of actions. He crouched beside the balcony door, tracing a small smear on the marble. Residue from gloves, perhaps? Or deliberate misdirection? Either is possible. But notice the angle. This traces the movement from the interior to the exterior. They exited with caution, checking angles, likely aware of potential observation. Holmes then examined the view outside, noting the precise locations of neighboring balconies, the faint glow of early morning activity along the beach, and the position of security cameras. The entire environment becomes a participant in this game, Watson. The thief calculates not only their actions, but the reactions of every living element in their path. We must think like them, anticipate the unseen, and decode each signal left behind. As we continued the search, Holmes paused at a small painting hung slightly askew on the wall. Removing it carefully, he discovered a safe embedded in the wall previously unnoticed. Its combination dial had been expertly tampered with, yet not fully unlocked. Holmes studied it, his fingers tracing the subtle notches left by the intruder. A delicate hand at work, he murmured. They were interrupted or chose to leave a trail for us. Either way, the contents of this safe may provide further insight into both motive and method. With precise movements, Holmes manipulated the lock, and the door clicked open to reveal documents, jewelry, and a sealed envelope bearing Victoria's family crest. Holmes carefully opened the envelope, revealing letters of correspondence that hinted at complex alliances and unspoken rivalries within the city's elite. One letter, in particular, referenced a scheduled exchange of valuable items at the docks, a connection that aligned with the information Delaney had provided the previous night. Holmes's eyes gleamed as he pieced together the narrative. We are observing a chain of events, Watson. Each action, each theft, each seemingly random occurrence is part of a carefully orchestrated sequence. The thief, or thieves, operate several steps ahead, yet their reliance on predictable human behavior leaves gaps. It is within these gaps that we will find our advantage. I could see the mental gears turning in Holmes's mind, each observation connecting to the next, forming a complex network of deduction. Do you believe Kane is the orchestrator? I asked, uncertain. Holmes shook his head slowly. No, Watson. Kane is significant, yet he is but one piece on this chessboard. The true mind operates in the shadows, using Kane and others as instruments to manipulate events. Our task is to illuminate those shadows without alerting the pieces they control. Precision, timing, and discretion are paramount. As we concluded our investigation of the suite, Holmes carefully cataloged the artifacts, notes, and medallions we had discovered, noting subtle connections between them. He then turned to me, eyes gleaming with determination. Watson, our next course must involve direct observation of the planned exchange at the docks. We now possess sufficient intelligence to anticipate moves, yet execution requires vigilance. Every individual we encounter may serve as ally or adversary, and deception is a constant companion. Miami, for all its beauty, conceals a labyrinth of motives, and tonight we shall step into it fully prepared. The weight of the morning's discoveries settled upon me, What had begun as a search for a stolen artifact had transformed into a complex web of intrigue, betrayal, and concealed motives. Holmes, ever methodical and unwavering, had dissected each clue, turning fragments of evidence into a coherent understanding of the forces at play. The city around us, vibrant and seemingly carefree, had become a stage upon which a dangerous game was unfolding, one that required intellect, courage, and a relentless eye for detail. As we left Victoria's hotel, the afternoon sun reflecting off the streets and water, I felt the full measure of our undertaking. The artifact, the medallions, the notes, the encrypted instructions. The evening air was thick with salt and anticipation as Holmes and I approached the Miami docks. The sun long since dipped below the horizon, leaving the city cloaked in a mixture of shadows and artificial light. The docks themselves were a maze of warehouses, rusted shipping containers, and the faint creak of timber underfoot, a labyrinth in which even the most vigilant could easily lose their way. Holmes moved with his usual precise caution, his gaze sweeping every corner, every shadow, cataloging the minutiae of the environment. The clues we had gathered from Victoria's suite, the medallions, and Delaney's information converged into a single directive. Observe carefully, anticipate the actions of Marcus Kane and his associates, and uncover the location and path of the stolen artifact. Our approach was measured, deliberately slow. Holmes paused frequently, crouching to inspect the gravel for footprints, the scuff marks left by crates being dragged, the faint traces of moisture that indicated recent passage. "Note the pattern, Watson," he murmured, each movement deliberate yet not without error. The slightest deviation betrays intention, fear, or urgency. These traces are our guide, but we must interpret them with care. I followed, careful to avoid disturbing the subtle evidence that Holmes observed so keenly. A faint movement caught my attention, and Holmes immediately gestured for silence. Between two stacks of containers, a shadow flitted with fluid precision, carrying what appeared to be a wrapped bundle. Our suspect moved with calculated urgency, every step deliberate yet cautious, eyes constantly scanning for observers. Holmes's lips curled slightly in recognition. "Patience, Watson. Observe before acting. Our adversary is clever yet not infallible. Each motion contains information, if one has the intellect to interpret it." The figure approached a small, isolated warehouse, disappearing behind a partially open sliding door. Holmes studied the entrance intently, noting the subtle imprints in the dust and the way the door had been handled. "They are precise, Watson," he said softly. "Not merely a thief, but someone who understands the value of concealment and timing. There is no room for error, yet even the meticulous leave traces. We must follow carefully, or risk losing the trail entirely." We skirted the perimeter using the shadows of stacked crates to conceal our presence. The night air was heavy, the faint sounds of water lapping against the docks mixing with the distant hum of the city. Every step required calculated patience, every rustle of gravel potentially signaling exposure. Holmes moved with fluid efficiency, his eyes scanning the surroundings, occasionally gesturing silently for me to pause or change direction. We reached a vantage point overlooking the warehouse entrance, observing the shadowy figure within. The bundle had been placed on the floor and partially unwrapped, revealing a glimpse of ornate metalwork that glinted under the sparse light, a tantalizing indication that the artifact had indeed been transported here. Suddenly, another figure emerged from the shadows, smaller and more deliberate in movement. This individual approached the first with caution, exchanging a series of whispered instructions and gestures, their faces barely discernible in the dim light. Holmes's eyes narrowed, noting the subtle dynamics of their interaction, the hierarchy, the signs of deference, the slight tension in posture. "Observe carefully, Watson," he whispered. "Even in a fleeting exchange, one can detect allegiance, authority, and anxiety. Every micro-expression, every shift of weight is a clue to intent." I strained to see the bundle as the figures manipulated it, suspecting that its contents were indeed the artifact we sought. Holmes's fingers brushed against mine in a subtle signal for attention as he tracked the figure's movements. "They are planning transportation, likely by water," he noted. The bundle's orientation, the careful handling, all suggest it is valuable, delicate, and dangerous. The thief anticipates interference, yet they underestimate the observer who sees beyond surface action. We watched as the figures finished their preliminary preparations, moving with precision toward a waiting boat tied along a creaking dock. The vessel was small, sleek, and inconspicuous, designed to blend with the shadows and the water. Holmes's eyes followed every detail: the angle of the rope, the distribution of weight, the subtle glances toward the docked surroundings. The plan is almost complete, Watson. They are methodical, calculating yet human. One misstep, one unobserved detail, and the chain of events will falter. As the figures lifted the bundle into the boat, Holmes crouched lower, whispering instructions. Now, Watson, observe the loading sequence. Notice the order, the care, and the subtle signs of urgency. These indicate both experience and nervousness. We may exploit either. I watched as Holmes catalogued every gesture: the placement of feet, the tension in fingers, the precise coordination required to avoid tipping the vessel or damaging the bundle. Each subtle nuance was a testament to the careful choreography of their plan. Without warning, the smaller figure glanced toward our position, sensing, perhaps, a distant observer. Holmes's hand shot up in a silent warning. The tension was palpable, the night suddenly electric with the threat of discovery. "Remain still, Watson," he hissed. "The smallest motion may betray us. They sense observation, yet cannot identify its source. Timing is everything." The boat slid silently into the water, guided with care by the larger figure. Holmes's sharp gaze tracked its movement, noting the subtle wake left behind, the angle of progression, and the likely destination. "They believe the darkness conceals them, Watson," he murmured. "Yet the intellect of observation penetrates shadows. Their confidence is both an asset and a vulnerability." I felt my heart quicken as the vessel drifted into the darker waters, its outline barely visible against the reflection of distant lights. Holmes moved with swift precision, leading us to a side route that would place us ahead of the boat's likely path. "We must intercept before the dock's end," he whispered, anticipating every turn. The thief relies on predictability within the chaos, yet even chaos has a rhythm that a keen eye can decode. We pressed on, careful to avoid the scattered debris and the occasional sentinel of the night, the faint glow of a security light, or the distant sound of a vehicle. Holmes's mind worked through the permutations of risk, the potential interventions of Kane and his associates, the possibility of ambush, and the location of the artifact. "Observe, Watson," he said. "The human element often betrays itself even amidst careful planning. Panic, hesitation, or simple overconfidence will create a momentary lapse. That is when opportunity arises." Suddenly a faint shout echoed across the water, a warning perhaps, or a call between accomplices. Holmes froze, listening intently, then signaled for immediate concealment behind a rusted container. The night seemed to contract around us, every sound amplified: the creak of the boat against the dock, the splash of water, the whisper of wind across the metal surfaces. Holmes's eyes scanned every angle, every potential approach, cataloging escape routes and identifying vulnerabilities. "They are aware of interference, Watson," he whispered, "yet not the nature of it. That is our advantage. Precision, speed, and intellect will determine the outcome." As the boat continued its cautious progress, Holmes's keen observation identified an irregularity: a loose plank along the dock, a rope inadequately secured, a minor miscalculation in weight distribution. "A single flaw, Watson," he said, his tone sharp with anticipation, "and the carefully orchestrated plan will unravel. We must exploit this without alerting the others to our presence." The moment arrived with startling clarity. As the boat rounded a narrow channel, the larger figure misjudged the load's balance, causing the vessel to tilt slightly. Holmes seized the instant, gesturing for me to act. We moved swiftly but silently, maneuvering to intercept without alerting the occupants. The artifact, precariously balanced, shifted within the bundle, glinting faintly in the sparse light. Holmes's calculations were precise: the exact angle, the distance, and the timing required to prevent loss or damage. With coordinated effort, we were upon the boat just as it neared a narrow landing point. Holmes's hand extended with unwavering steadiness, securing the bundle with deft skill, while I ensured the occupants were momentarily distracted by our sudden presence. Chaos erupted briefly: shouts, scrambling feet, and the splash of water. But Holmes maintained control, guiding the artifact safely onto solid ground. The thief's momentary lapse had been sufficient. Their meticulous plan disrupted, now hung precariously on a knife edge. Holmes studied the individuals before us, his gaze unwavering, cataloging their reactions, gestures, and possible next moves. "The plan is compromised, Watson," he said quietly. "Yet observe, they are not without resources or intention. Each has a role, each will adapt. We have gained possession of the artifact, but the game is far from concluded. The mastermind remains at large, anticipating our moves even now." As the tension settled, the night's dangers seemed to recede slightly, leaving the docks bathed in a quiet luminescence from the distant city lights. Holmes, ever the vigilant mind, secured the bundle carefully, his attention already shifting to the next phase of the pursuit. "Miami, for all its beauty and charm, conceals both brilliance and danger," he said, eyes scanning the dark horizon. "Tonight we have intercepted a critical step, but the chain of events continues." The aftermath of the docks encounter left Miami streets quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. The night had absorbed the echoes of chaos, leaving behind only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional splash of water against the harbor. Holmes and I returned to our temporary lodgings with the artifact secured, yet the weight of the evening's events lingered. Holmes's mind, as always, moved faster than the physical journey could keep pace with, analyzing every detail, every possibility, every misstep by our adversaries that had allowed us this partial victory. "Watson," he began, his voice low and precise, "we have disrupted one link in the chain, but we must now consider the broader web. The mastermind, as we have already surmised, anticipates each movement, each intervention. They rely not merely on the audacity of theft, but on the predictability of human behavior, and predictability can be exploited, yet with care." We rested briefly before deciding to pursue the next thread of the enigma. The information from Victoria's journals, the notes from Miss Delaney, and the observations at the docks all pointed toward a location that had not yet been investigated: Marcus Kane's mansion, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Miami. Intelligence suggested that Kane was planning further movements, likely to consolidate control over the artifact and its surrounding implications. Holmes emphasized caution. Kane's mansion was not simply a residence but a fortress, and Kane himself was far more dangerous than the pawns we had encountered at the docks. Driving through the city streets, we noted subtle signs of surveillance. Cars parked seemingly at random, individuals loitering at intersections, cameras angled in precise, deliberate directions, all indicated that Kane or his associates were aware of our pursuit. Holmes's eyes absorbed every detail, cataloging movements and noting behavioral patterns. "Predictability, Watson," he muttered, "is a valuable asset, and yet these individuals underestimate the observer who sees beyond mere appearances. Every step we take must anticipate the observer's anticipation of us." The mansion appeared before us as we turned a long, tree-lined avenue. Its grandeur was unmistakable: marble columns, manicured gardens, wrought iron gates. But there was an unmistakable sense of sterility, a calculated order that hinted at the meticulousness of its owner. Holmes studied the entrance, noting subtle imperfections in the gates, the angle of floodlights, and the irregularity of patrols along the perimeter. "Kane is cautious," he observed, "but caution can be parsed. There is rhythm to this surveillance, and rhythm reveals weakness." We bypassed the main entrance, choosing instead to approach from a less obvious route suggested by the mansion's side gardens. Holmes moved with a cat-like precision, his gaze constantly sweeping, his posture low and controlled. Every shadow was examined, every rustle considered. The mansion, for all its elegance, revealed its secrets to the trained eye. Slight discoloration in the hedge suggesting a pathway, subtle wear on stone steps, faint reflections in the windows hinting at movement within. As we neared a side entrance, a figure emerged, an associate of Kane, tall, imposing, yet moving with caution. Holmes immediately signaled for concealment behind a dense hedge. The figure paused, eyes scanning the grounds with deliberate care before entering a service door. Holmes studied the individual closely. "Observe the nervousness, Watson. Even the most confident guard may betray uncertainty when faced with potential disruption. This is our opening." We slipped inside the mansion through a discreet side passage, avoiding detection. The interior exuded wealth and precision. Polished floors reflected soft lighting, walls adorned with expensive art, and the air carried a faint scent of rare cigars. Yet beneath the opulence there was a tension, a quiet that suggested control was enforced, not earned. Holmes moved swiftly, analyzing each detail: The arrangement of furniture, the subtle misalignments in paintings, the faint fingerprints on glass surfaces. "Every item speaks, Watson," he whispered. "Even the smallest displacement conveys intent, routine, or negligence. Our task is to interpret correctly." We made our way toward a study at the heart of the mansion. Holmes paused at the doorway, peering inside. Kane was present, pacing slightly, the artifact now unwrapped and displayed on a central table. Two associates flanked him, one holding the medallion we had found at Victoria's suite. The room was tense. Voices were low but carried authority, each word chosen carefully. Holmes observed minute gestures, the way Kane's hands rested on the table, the subtle lean of his head toward the medallion, the occasional glance toward a surveillance monitor embedded discreetly within the decor. Holmes motioned for me to stay hidden as he advanced silently. His eyes never left Kane, interpreting each motion with precision. "Notice, Watson," he whispered. "The micro-expressions, the posture, the manner in which they handle the artifact. These are all indicators of hierarchy, intent, and vulnerability." Suddenly, one of Kane's associates reached toward a hidden drawer, producing a small vial. The contents glimmered faintly, a clear liquid suspiciously aromatic. Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Poison? A tracking substance?" "Perhaps both. Attention to detail is paramount. Every element may conceal threat or deception." At that moment, a soft sound echoed behind us. A door clicked. Holmes's eyes flicked toward it, and we glimpsed Victoria herself entering quietly from an adjoining corridor. She moved with urgency, her eyes scanning the room as she approached the artifact. Kane noticed her immediately, his posture stiffening, his expression masking surprise and annoyance. "Victoria," he said, his voice controlled but tense, "you shouldn't be here." "This is—" Holmes stepped forward, revealing our presence. Kane's reaction was instantaneous, a mixture of shock, recognition, and calculated composure. "Holmes," he said, voice low and measured, "I see you've intercepted my arrangements, but you misjudge the situation if you believe this ends here." Victoria's expression was a blend of relief and apprehension. She glanced at Holmes, then at Kane, and spoke quickly. "Kane, you cannot control this. You may have acquired the artifact temporarily, but you are underestimating the forces you've set in motion. There are consequences you cannot predict." Kane's eyes narrowed, the mask of composure slipping momentarily. "You speak as if you understand the full scope, Victoria. But it is you who are naive. The artifact's value is not in itself. It is the influence it commands, the leverage it provides over certain interests, and those interests will ensure compliance." Holmes observed the dynamics carefully, noting subtle alliances and tensions. His mind cataloged the hierarchy, the psychological interplay, and the potential for rapid escalation. "Watson," he whispered, "observe. Control and fear often masquerade as authority, yet cracks appear where ambition and morality conflict. This is our opportunity to intervene decisively." Before we could act, one of Kane's associates moved toward Victoria, intending to seize the artifact. Holmes reacted with lightning speed, intercepting the motion, guiding the individual aside with a controlled application of leverage. Kane's other associate lunged, and I found myself forced to restrain him as well. The room erupted briefly into tension, yet Holmes's presence, calm and commanding, dictated the flow. Kane's attention, divided between defense and strategy, allowed Holmes to maneuver Victoria toward safety. "Follow me," Holmes instructed her, voice low but firm. "We must secure the artifact and ensure that Kane cannot regain leverage." Victoria complied, her eyes wide with a mixture of trust and fear. Holmes continued to control the situation, moving with fluid precision, redirecting Kane's attention and exploiting every hesitation. Within moments, we reached a concealed passage that led from the study to an exterior garden. The night air was cool, carrying a hint of oceanic breeze, and for the first time since the evening began, a sense of temporary security settled over us. Holmes secured the artifact carefully, ensuring it remained protected from any immediate threat. Holmes turned to Kane, who now stood in the study doorway, fury and calculation in his gaze. "The game is far from concluded," Holmes said quietly. "But tonight your advantage has been neutralized. Every move henceforth will be anticipated, every miscalculation exploited. You may possess resources, influence, and allies, but intellect, foresight, and careful observation remain formidable forces that will continue to counteract your ambitions." Kane's lips tightened, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes betrayed the calculation of a man already revising strategy. Victoria remained close to Holmes, a faint tremor in her composure but determination in her stance. The night stretched ahead, fraught with uncertainty, yet the immediate threat had been mitigated. As we moved away from the mansion, Holmes catalogued every detail, the security measures, the psychological interplay, the latent threats, and the behavioral patterns of all involved. "Watson," he said finally, voice calm but insistent, "we have disrupted one phase of the Enigma, yet the web continues to unravel. Every participant is a variable, every environment a challenge. Miami conceals both opportunity and peril, and our vigilance must never waver. The next steps will test intellect, courage, and perception as never before." The streets of Miami were quieter than usual the following evening, as though the city itself sensed the unfolding tension. The calm was deceptive. Holmes and I navigated the dimly lit avenues with caution, aware that the events at Kane's mansion had likely triggered a flurry of activity among those invested in the artifact. Our temporary lodgings offered a vantage point over a narrow alley, allowing Holmes to monitor discrete movement patterns while simultaneously planning our next steps. He held the artifact in a secure case, examining it meticulously under the soft glow of a desk lamp. The medallions, the journals, and the encoded notes from Victoria all hinted at a larger design, an intricate plan that had not yet revealed its ultimate objective. Holmes's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Watson," he said, "the pattern is emerging. Kane was but a link in the chain, an intermediary whose actions are dictated by the mind we have yet to identify. Our next challenge will not be mere recovery, but the revelation of the orchestrator who manipulates these events from the shadows." We left the room shortly after dusk, making our way to a section of Miami Beach where intelligence suggested an imminent rendezvous. Delaney had provided a subtle lead, a waterfront club that operated with a level of secrecy designed to evade casual scrutiny. Its exterior was unremarkable, blending seamlessly with adjacent buildings, yet the subtle signals we observed, discreet arrivals, guarded expressions, and patterns of entry, confirmed our suspicions. Holmes noted the positions of streetlights, the angle of the moonlight on reflective surfaces, and the movement of pedestrians with a precision that bordered on obsessive. "Observe, Watson," he murmured. "The environment itself is a participant. Every human element interacts with its context, revealing intent and potential vulnerability." We entered the club cautiously. The music, muted yet present, mingled with the aroma of rare cigars and the faint tang of salt from the ocean. Holmes's gaze immediately identified several individuals from prior investigations, their mannerisms betraying subtle tension. Kane's associates were here, but more significantly, a figure of commanding presence occupied a secluded area near the back, a man whose bearing suggested intelligence, authority, and an unmistakable element of danger. Holmes's eyes narrowed, recognizing the subtle signals of dominance and control. "Watson, this is our adversary," he whispered. The mastermind, concealed in plain sight, directing the flow of events with precision. Observe their interactions, the micro-expressions, and the subtleties of posture. Every detail informed strategy. The figure spoke in measured tones with a series of individuals who approached and departed in quick succession, exchanging small items, gestures, and coded phrases. Holmes catalogued each movement, noting patterns of deference, hesitation, and the intricate choreography of influence. "They rely on structure, hierarchy, and psychology," Holmes murmured. "Observe the subtleties, the interplay of fear, respect, and anticipation. Each signal is deliberate, yet each also contains a weakness if interpreted correctly." We remained concealed for several tense minutes, waiting for the orchestrator to act, when a sudden shift occurred. One of Kane's associates approached the central figure with a small wrapped bundle. The exchange was brief yet precise, the movements deliberate, rehearsed yet tinged with subtle anxiety. Holmes's eyes tracked every nuance, the slight hesitation in the associate's hands, the careful inspection by the mastermind, the imperceptible glance toward an unseen observer. "Timing, Watson," he whispered, "is everything. Anticipate, predict, and exploit the subtle lapse that will inevitably occur." I felt a ripple of tension as Holmes signaled for us to move closer, navigating the shadows with silent efficiency. The mastermind was aware of movement within the club, scanning the environment with keen attention, yet the angle of our approach allowed us to remain unnoticed. Holmes gestured for Victoria to join us quietly, her presence a stabilizing factor in the unfolding plan. Together we advanced toward a small side room that overlooked a discreet back exit, a route likely to be used for the transfer of the artifact. The orchestrator received another visitor, this one bringing documents and a second medallion, which was examined carefully before being placed beside the first. Holmes's lips curved slightly. Familiarity breeds carelessness, Watson. Even the most meticulous may become distracted by repetition or overconfidence. Observe the positioning, the reactions, the angle of attention. They will reveal the first hint of vulnerability. At that moment, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, alerted the mastermind. Their eyes flicked toward a corner where shadows shifted subtly. Holmes had anticipated this, having mapped possible vantage points and concealed movement. The mastermind's body tensed, subtle gestures betraying both recognition and irritation. "They know," Holmes whispered, "that observation is occurring yet cannot locate its source. That imbalance is our leverage." With rapid precision, Holmes signaled for me and Victoria to execute a minor diversion. A small object was nudged from a shelf, producing a soft but noticeable clatter. The mastermind's gaze snapped toward the sound, and in that microsecond of distraction, Holmes moved decisively. With a fluid motion, he secured the medallions and the artifact, ensuring they remained protected while simultaneously positioning Victoria safely behind a series of decorative panels. The mastermind reacted instantly, rising from their seat with a controlled yet threatening motion. Kane's associates, sensing disruption, shifted positions, their eyes darting nervously. Holmes's voice, calm but commanding, cut through the tension. "Your efforts, though calculated, rely on predictable patterns, observation of human error, and assumed compliance. That assumption ends tonight." A tense standoff ensued. The mastermind's eyes, sharp and calculating, evaluated our positions, anticipating potential moves. Holmes, ever analytical, noted the subtle shifts in balance, the angle of the feet, the tension in the shoulders. "Observe, Watson," he murmured. "Strategy and counter-strategy play out not only in direct confrontation, but in subtle micro-expressions and bodily language. One must perceive intent as much as action." Suddenly, Kane's presence complicated matters. He had followed from the docks, entering unnoticed, intent on reclaiming influence over the artifact. The orchestrator, momentarily distracted by Holmes's maneuvering, hesitated, a fraction of hesitation sufficient for Kane to step forward. "You think to interfere, Holmes?" Kane's voice was low, dangerous, yet edged with frustration. "The game is beyond your reach." Holmes's gaze never wavered. "Reach, Mr. Kane, is not determined by audacity alone, but by comprehension, foresight, and the observation of every detail. You have miscalculated again." In that instant, the orchestrator attempted a subtle movement, reaching for an object concealed beneath the table, a potential weapon or mechanism to reclaim the artifact. Holmes anticipated the action with the precision of a chess master, intercepting the movement and redirecting the individual's attention with controlled pressure and verbal redirection. Kane's associates, unsure of their next step, faltered, providing the brief window Holmes required to neutralize immediate threats. The tension reached its apex as the mastermind, realizing the advantage had shifted, attempted an abrupt exit toward the back corridor. Holmes, already predicting this contingency, blocked the pathway with calculated positioning, forcing a confrontation on his terms. "It seems the shadows you rely upon," he said quietly, "are less protective than you assumed. And yet your ingenuity is evident. Now we may converse." The orchestrator's eyes glinted, a mixture of frustration, respect, and cunning. "Holmes," they said, voice calm yet icy, "you have indeed predicted more than I expected. But Miami is merely a stage. You have delayed the inevitable, not prevented it. The artifact's power extends beyond these shores, and you cannot contain what you do not fully comprehend." Holmes's expression remained unreadable, though his eyes were ablaze with intellect. "Comprehension, my dear adversary, is cumulative. Each observation, each deduction, each subtle clue builds toward understanding. Your arrogance assumes mastery over circumstances and human behavior alike. That assumption is flawed." The orchestrator hesitated, calculating the next move, while Kane's frustration mounted. Victoria, observing from a safe distance, appeared torn between fear and determination. Holmes stepped forward slightly, asserting both physical and psychological control. "You may possess strategy, influence, and subtlety," he said, voice measured yet commanding. "But intellect, foresight, and observation remain formidable. Your plan, though intricate, is not infallible. Consider your next action carefully. It will determine the outcome." For a tense moment, silence dominated the room. The orchestrator weighed options. Kane fumed silently, and Holmes catalogued every nuance, preparing for the eventual resolution. Then, with calculated elegance, the orchestrator finally spoke. "Very well, Holmes. You have bested me for now, but the game is far from over. Consider this a temporary victory, for now." With a swift, precise motion, they vanished into a concealed exit, leaving behind a room thick with tension and unspoken threat. Kane, realizing the immediate loss of control, withdrew slightly, his eyes dark with suppressed rage. Holmes, maintaining composure, secured the artifact and the medallions, ensuring their protection before signaling Victoria to move. The night was heavy with anticipation as Holmes, Victoria, and I navigated the quiet streets of Miami, the ocean's distant waves blending with the low hum of city lights. The mastermind's retreat from the waterfront club left a palpable tension in the air, as if the city itself had paused to await the final act of this intricate game. Holmes moved with his characteristic precision, cataloging every detail of the streets, the alleys, and the potential vantage points that could be used for observation or ambush. "Watson," he murmured, "we now enter the concluding phase. The orchestrator's temporary withdrawal has afforded us insight, yet the ultimate objective remains concealed. We must anticipate, adapt, and execute with absolute precision." We proceeded toward a secluded pier along the northern edge of the harbor. Delaney's informants had suggested that this location was critical, a transfer point, a rendezvous, and perhaps the location of the mastermind's final maneuver. The pier stretched into the darkness like a skeletal finger, illuminated sporadically by faint floodlights and the reflections of moonlight on the water. Holmes moved ahead, his keen eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every ripple of activity on the dock. Even the subtle shifts in wind and tide, he noted, could betray the approach of an intruder. As we approached, a small, sleek vessel came into view, tied to the pier but barely discernible in the night. Holmes signaled for silence and observation. The mastermind's associates were present, their movements precise yet tense, suggesting an awareness of vulnerability. Holmes's gaze, sharp and unwavering, catalogued each individual, their posture, the weight of their bodies, the micro-expressions betraying anxiety beneath a mask of confidence. "Observe, Watson," he whispered. "The hierarchy and interactions reveal both intent and uncertainty. Every motion is calculated, yet every calculation is subject to error." We moved closer, careful to remain hidden behind stacked crates and low-lying cargo. The mastermind had returned, stepping onto the pier with deliberate caution, a shadow of authority radiating in every movement. Holmes's eyes gleamed as he analyzed the patterns of movement, the spacing between individuals, the anticipated sequence of actions for the transfer of the artifact. "They believe the darkness protects them," Holmes said quietly, "yet intellect penetrates shadows. Predictability is their flaw. Anticipation is ours." Suddenly, one of the associates began unwrapping a crate, revealing the artifact's familiar form, the medallions arranged meticulously beside it. Holmes's eyes narrowed, cataloging the placement, the orientation, the subtle markings that suggested prior handling and preparation. "Timing, Watson," he muttered, "is critical. The smallest lapse, the slightest hesitation will determine control. Observation alone will not suffice. We must intervene with precision." A faint sound, water lapping against the pier, caused the mastermind to glance toward the edge, subtle suspicion in their posture. Holmes seized the opportunity. With fluid motion, he directed Victoria to remain behind a stack of crates while he and I prepared to intervene. Kane was nowhere in sight, likely regrouping after the prior setbacks, leaving the mastermind's immediate circle vulnerable. Holmes's strategy was meticulous: control the artifact, isolate the mastermind, and prevent any escape routes. The associates moved the crate carefully toward the vessel, unaware that Holmes had anticipated the trajectory. "Now, Watson," he whispered, "observe the alignment of motion. Every action has a consequence. Every misstep will create opportunity." As the crate reached the boat, Holmes acted. With precise calculation, he intercepted the movement, securing the artifact while simultaneously blocking the mastermind's advance. The vessel rocked slightly, a splash of water sending ripples across the pier, adding to the tension and disorientation. The mastermind reacted instantly, a mixture of shock and controlled fury in their eyes. "Holmes," they said, voice low and edged with ice, "you have once again disrupted my plans. But this is far from over. Miami is but a stage, and the true game lies beyond your comprehension." Holmes's gaze was unwavering, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle shift in weight, every calculated risk the individual took. "Comprehension, my dear adversary," he said quietly, "is cumulative. Every observation, every deduction, every subtle cue leads to understanding. Your assumptions of mastery are flawed, and your reliance on predictability has become your weakness." The mastermind's associates, realizing the artifact had been secured, attempted a coordinated response, moving to intercept. Holmes anticipated this, using a combination of verbal commands, physical positioning, and subtle manipulation of their environment to neutralize the threat. The subtle clatter of crates, the splash of water, the displacement of shadows, all were orchestrated to control perception and leverage confusion. Within moments, the immediate threats were contained, and the mastermind found themselves cornered, the artifact now firmly in Holmes's possession. A tense standoff ensued. The mastermind's eyes, sharp and calculating, evaluated every possibility, seeking an escape route or a diversion. Holmes, equally measured, catalogued the layout, the lines of sight, and the psychological state of every individual present. "Observe, Watson," he murmured, "the interplay of strategy, control, and human instinct. Even brilliance falters when faced with precise anticipation." Suddenly, the mastermind made a subtle motion toward a concealed device in their coat, a potential weapon or signaling mechanism. Holmes, ever alert, anticipated the action with lightning speed, redirecting the individual with controlled physical leverage while simultaneously securing the artifact. The mastermind's expression shifted from confidence to frustration, the realization dawning that their control had slipped. Victoria, observing from her concealed position, stepped forward, her voice steady yet carrying urgency. "This ends now," she said. "You underestimated the vigilance and intellect arrayed against you. The artifact is not merely an object of power. It is evidence, leverage, and responsibility. Your ambitions end here." The mastermind, momentarily distracted by Victoria's intervention, faltered. Holmes seized the instant, positioning himself decisively to block any further maneuvering. "The game is concluded, not merely delayed," he said, voice calm yet commanding. "Your intellect and preparation, though formidable, are insufficient against precise observation, foresight, and adaptive reasoning. Surrender is now the only viable option." Realizing the inevitability of their capture, the mastermind's expression hardened, a fleeting admixture of anger, respect, and resignation. Their associates, similarly aware, lowered their stance, conceding the immediate confrontation. Holmes maintained control of the artifact, observing the psychological transition from defiance to acquiescence with meticulous attention. Authorities, pre-informed by Delaney's discreet coordination, arrived moments later, apprehending the mastermind and their remaining associates. The artifact, medallions, and accompanying documents were secured, their protection now assured. Holmes catalogued every element of the capture, the sequence of movements, the behavioral cues, the decision-making patterns, all forming a comprehensive record of the orchestrator's methods and vulnerabilities. As the sun rose over Miami Beach, painting the horizon with streaks of gold and crimson, Holmes, Victoria, and I returned to a place of relative calm. The city, resuming its rhythm, seemed oblivious to the intricacies of the night's events. Holmes, ever contemplative, examined the artifact once more, turning it in his hands with care. "The enigma, Watson, is resolved," he said softly. "Yet every solution unveils new complexities. Every discovery invites deeper questions. The artifact's value lies not only in its material worth, but in the chain of intellect, ambition, and human behavior it has revealed." Victoria, her composure returning, approached Holmes. "You have not only secured the artifact but revealed the true scope of those who seek to manipulate power," she said. "Your foresight prevented disaster and ensured that truth prevailed." Holmes's expression softened slightly, acknowledging her words with quiet respect. "Indeed, Miss Lang, Intelligence and vigilance, when applied with precision, illuminate the shadows in which ambition and duplicity dwell. Yet we must remain aware. Such forces never vanish entirely. They merely await opportunity. For now, however, order is restored, and the Enigma's resolution stands as testament to careful observation, deliberate reasoning, and unyielding perseverance. As we stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the waves glinting under the morning sun, I felt the weight of the past nights, the tension, the danger, the intricate dance of deduction finally ease. Holmes's mind, as always, was already cataloging the implications, the remaining questions, and the subtle details that might hint at future mysteries. Yet for the moment the city was calm, the artifact secured, and the mastermind apprehended. Holmes turned to me, a rare smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Watson, the night has tested intellect, patience, and courage. The enigma has concluded, yet the thrill of deduction remains. Miami, for all its beauty and complexity, has revealed both peril and insight, and we, having navigated its labyrinthine intrigue, may finally appreciate the delicate balance between chaos and comprehension